Hello, everyone. Good evening. For those of you watching the replay, thank you so much for joining me this evening, or whatever time of day this is for you. I'm actually really excited to have this discussion with all of you about living well with anxiety and depression. I decided I wanted to go ahead and share this with everyone because I feel like this is a topic that it's kind of acknowledged and in more of a wow, that stinks kind of way. It's not so much acknowledged in a empowerment and let's make a change kind of way. And so I'm really excited to share with you my journey for the last 8 years and some things that I have learned that work, and some things that I've found that don't. But more than anything else, but I want my goal in this is to help you not feel alone and help you feel like there are options. And if you're trying, like if you're like me and you're trying to do things a certain way and you need more support in that, I want you to know there's people out there who will support you on your journey. And I'm one of them. So without further ado, let's get started. I just want to go ahead and just clarify right up front. I am not a doctor. I'm not a physician. I do not have an MD or anything like that. I'm not going to diagnose, treat, or cure anyone on this call. But I am very passionate about natural wellness and doing things as naturally as possible. And that's not how I started, which is a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So let's just dive in. My story. So in 2012, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. We had our very first child in arms. We lost our very first child, John, in 2011. In April, we lost our first baby. We had a miscarriage. And so Esperanza was our rainbow baby. She was our hope after the storm. And it's cool that her name actually means hope as well. So we had SB in March of 2012, and very quickly after that, I was seeing a counselor, and I was really struggling. And the counselor had said that I should talk to my physician about postpartum depression and medication for it. And I remember looking at him and saying to him, that makes a lot of sense. And I would, however, my Medicaid ends in, I think, 4 days during that meeting. And so I knew that medication wasn't going to be an option for me long term because I wouldn't have the funding for it. By the time I saw a doctor too and got an appointment, my Medicaid would have already been expired. And so we were living without health insurance because it was unaffordable for us. Our daughter was covered under Medicaid, but we could not afford health care for ourselves. And so a large reason of actually why I went without medication was because I couldn't afford it. And because it was just not an option. Another reason too is I was actually trying to breastfeed my daughter, and I was exclusively pumping. So I spent the first 3 months of her life with her across my lap, my finger in her mouth, pump on one side and a syringe in the hand. And like, it looked like something out of a movie. It was so crazy. And I was trying really hard to give her what I thought at the time was the very best. We ended up giving her some formula and supplementing with formula. And I was able to get my milk to come in pretty well. But we always supplemented with formula if she was still hungry past her bottles of breast milk. And so anyway, I spent the first 11 months pumping and bottle feeding her breast milk, like all the time. And so I had mastitis 3 times in that journey. Oh, it was a crazy, crazy season. My husband was pursuing being a pastor of a church. We moved to Charlottesville, so we relocated and left our entire support system in West Virginia. So we were kind of like out on our own and didn't exactly have any family in town. There were people who were part of the original church plant that were willing to help out, but we didn't really know how to ask for help. Anybody else like that? I know it can't possibly be only me. So anyway, after the struggle and everything there, we ended up getting pregnant again with our second child, Toa. And I was doing better when I was pregnant. So pregnancy was a lot better. It was still really hard though, because I was really struggling with loneliness. I was really struggling with feeling like a failure as a mom. And there were some good moments, but the depression was pretty strong, and it was pretty hard, and it was pretty intense. Joa and SB are 18 months apart. So I pretty much finished pumping and feeding SB, and I was pregnant within 2 months of quitting that. So it was pretty quick turnaround as far as that goes. And so anyway, I continued on through the journey of depression and loneliness and everything like that. We moved a lot after that. We ended up closing the church. And so I was dealing with my husband feeling like a failure in some ways, both of us feeling like a failure, because when you're leading a church, it's not all on one of you. It's the both of you together. You're a team. And we were a team as a family. And so that was definitely very hard transitioning from out of leading a church into a new place. And so we ended up moving to Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Virginia, which is where we currently are right now. And we moved here because it's where our pastors now were wondering, what's going to happen to Jeff and Kim. They were concerned about us, and my husband prayed about it and really felt like he wanted to go where he was celebrated and where our family was welcomed. And so here, another Foursquare church had invited us to come be a part of their staff. And so we did. We joined Coastlands Community Church here in Chesapeake, and we have been a part of that church family now for 5 years this August. And so it's been a journey for us too, just like constantly moving. Since we've lived here in 5 years, we've moved 4 times, 4 houses, constantly changing to new locations. I think for me, the biggest struggle too was just learning how to ask for help, but at the same time feeling like I need to have it together. And then how to own up to the fact that I was struggling with loneliness. And, it's different when you're like a pastor's wife and you feel like you're supposed to have it together for your congregation or whatever. And so even in Charlottesville, I struggled a lot with loneliness because I didn't really know how to talk about my struggles and how to feel like a failure in front of other people. I'm a lot better at feeling like a failure in front of other people. I just own it. I'm just like, yeah, I totally screwed this up. And I definitely will say I have a lot more friends because I'm a lot more transparent now. But I just didn't know how to do that back then because I really had this feeling like I had to have it together. And so that was a really, really big deal. So I went through a lot of that. That's kind of like where I've been in the last 8 months to now. I'm sure there's many more details that might help understand more. But for the sake of time, I want to move on and just kind of help for those of you who've never experienced depression or anxiety and you're watching this because you want to understand others. I just want to talk a little bit about what depression looks like. Depression is often going to look like a feeling of emptiness within the person, a very numb feeling. It's like numb to the point where you just simply don't care. So there's a lot of apathy. It's a very lonely feeling, and you can be surrounded by people and feel completely alone. Depression feels like you're inside of this really weird bubble that has its own frequency that no one else understands or speaks. And it's funny because I remember so many times, people who don't understand depression say things lovingly, but rather annoyingly to you, like, well, just pray yourself out of it or worship yourself out of it. Or, they would say all these things that are well-meaning and quite right. It's not possible when depression has crippled you. And so depression is a very crippling thing. It debilitates you. You're immovable. You are often you have no feeling. So there's no compassion. There's no whatever. There's nothing. It's just blank slate, just nothing. And so it's very hard to climb out of that. And often people who are depressed, like me, a lot of people, when I've said that I struggled with depression, they were all like completely shocked that that was even a thing for me, because whenever I'm around people, they're like, wow, you're so fun. You're so bright. I would never know that that was the case. And, probably only my friends who've ever had depression were the only ones who actually would tell hey, are you doing okay? And so, and some friends just knew to ask me that question because they knew that that was the struggle in the past. And so depression is not always easy to spot in others, because it's usually something that happens when we're alone. It's usually something that happens um, when we're just, bedtime, nighttime, the quiet times of the day, and often in the morning. And so depression is that's kind of what it looks like, and it's, again, hard to spot, but very real. Anxiety is something that hit me probably about 10 months ago. So I never really understood anxiety. I had a lot of friends, especially with what I do for a living, talk to me about anxiety and different things that can help with anxiety. And having had not experienced it, it was very hard for me to give them suggestions and help them on their health journey without having experienced it firsthand. And so I would just have to kind of reference other things and what other people had said. And I remember even helping a girlfriend out probably like 4 years ago, before I'd ever even had a single anxiety attack that I'm aware of. And and I actually made her a roll on and everything like that. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, my daughter and I fight over it. It's like the best thing ever." And so, I knew I was helping people. I just didn't understand how significant the help was, and how significant natural health could impact that. Until I moved into this house that we're living in right now. I think we'd been living here for probably like 2 months. And all of a sudden I was getting into gear with work. I was getting into gear with my business. Things were starting to grow. And you know how in life, whenever you're starting to do really well with something, it's like all of a sudden it's like, just all bad things come and just want to pull that rug out right from underneath of you. And you're just like, "Oh my God, how do I do this?" And it was one of those moments, because with my business, I do a lot of relationship with people. And it was like a rug got pulled out from underneath me. And it was, the poop hit the fan with a friend. And it just like was one thing after another. I had adult son who was getting ready to go to college, but he was kind of resisting the whole like being at home thing. And so I had a lot of dynamics happening there with having a 22-year-old son. I think he was actually 21 at the time, turning 22. So anyhow, it was just a whole lot of drama in my home, a whole lot of drama in my business life, and a whole lot of pressure on me as well. And I remember, like, I won't ever forget this moment. I remember sitting on my couch in my living room and feeling like my heart was going to explode out of my chest. Like I had physical pain and I could feel it racing. And I felt like I was in a car going 100 miles an hour and somebody was pushing me to go faster. And I couldn't catch my breath. I thought I was going to like freak out at the first thing that happened. And I was really hoping that my tiny humans were their best behavior, because I knew if one thing fell apart, I was going to like blow my top easily. And I knew in that moment, like just right away, I just immediately started praying. I'm like, "What is this?" And immediately I felt like God said, "Anxiety, look up anxiety." So I got out my phone and I started looking up stuff for what an anxiety attack was, and like what things can help with anxiety attacks, and just essential oils maybe that might help or something. And so there's a lot of resources that you can actually look up online, and there's apps too. And so I have this app. I looked up the word anxiety and I found some essential oils that I was like, "Okay, let's try this." And so I grabbed a bottle, like the first one that stood out to me, and I just immediately grabbed it and I just took a couple deep breaths, and I could feel my heart calming down. I could feel me calming down. I could feel somebody took their foot off the gas pedal, and everything was starting to settle down. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever experienced an anxiety attack. And I really was hoping it was going to be my last because I finally was like, wow. And I was really hoping it was one of those moments. I don't know if anyone else has had this happen where you're like, wow, I think I experienced it for the first time so I can understand others. Right. And you're like hoping that that's going to be, going to be it. Like, I'm not going to experience it again. This was a one-time thing just so that I have the grace to fully understand what somebody else is going through. But that wasn't the case. Not for me. I ended up going through 8 straight months of lots and lots of fun trips down memory lane on what exactly anxiety feels like. And so then I was actually dealing with anxiety and depression simultaneously. And so that was not very fun of a season for me. I was definitely trying to use different natural products. And again, I'm one of those people that we haven't always had health insurance. Even when we did, the deductibles were really high. And I'm just not, I'm too cheap, I'm too Asian. I'm just like, I'm not going to spend the money. I haven't tried to kill my children yet, so I think we're doing okay. But I've always also been in communication with counselors and other actual medical professionals as well. And so for me, the level of depression and anxiety that I have fought, I have been able to manage naturally. And so anyway, I just want you guys to understand what depression and anxiety are based off of those stories. I hope that really helps for those of you who have never experienced this and this is unrelatable for you, that hearing these features and qualities about anxiety and depression help you understand exactly what your loved one might be going through. But I just want to say that it is very crippling and it can feel very hopeless. And there are a lot of things that we can do to help us along the way. Okay. So I just want to say this right up front. If you have depression and anxiety and suicide, death, and murder crossed your mind, I say it jokingly because I can laugh about that, but it's not a laughing matter. If any of those things come across you definitely need to be seeing a counselor. Like, you definitely need to be seeing a medical professional, and you really should consider medication. Like, it's just the reality of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in medication. And I just want to say that right off the bat, because there's no way I'm going to have this conversation about living well with anxiety and depression and not bring up the fact that medication is very, very significant for serious cases. Okay. I'm going to talk about my journey and how I did not use medication. And there were many moments where I really wished I could have. But there were many moments that because I didn't, I learned a lot. And so that's really what I'm here to share, is more about my journey and the things that I have found that help. And so the first few things I want to share with you guys are the practical things that you need to be doing. When you have depression, especially, you need to be in the light about it. You need to be open and honest. And a lot of people know that I have struggled with depression for a long time now because of how public I have made my journey. I've posted all kinds of posts on social media. I've talked about it with friends. I treat it like it's just, dyeing my hair or wearing glasses. Okay. It's just a part of me because it has been a part of me. And to not acknowledge that it was a part of me for a season, because I'm trying to speak past tense about it because I don't want it to be a part of me forever. But to be that transparent and honest about it, it gives you the freedom to be you when you need to be you. And it allows your friends to understand why you didn't show up for something when you texted them and said, I'm really feeling low right now and I'm not going to be able to make it. They're going to know what that means. They're not going to be like, man, that jerk, she didn't want to come hang out with us. You know what I mean? They're going to be like, wow, I need to really reach out to my friend tomorrow, or follow up, or send her a card, or give her a call, or shoot her a text message, or come over to her house and just invade her space and love on her. So being in the light is really powerful. If you're somebody who is hanging out with somebody who has depression, or you're here to help a loved one, like, go ahead and invade their space. Just show up, and don't try to fix them. Just show up, cuddle with them. If they feel like watching a movie, watch the movie with them. Don't try to fix anything. Just spend time with them and just don't let them be alone. Because sometimes that's really all we need, is to just know that we're not alone, because mentally we can't convince ourselves that. And so if somebody's there physically and tangibly who loves us and accepts us with our busted depression, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to make it, and we may not smile. We may not seem very hopeful, but the reality is that there's an impact that's being made. So don't be afraid to just show up at your friend's house who's struggling with depression. And I'm pretty sure most of us who've had depression and a friend just wants to sit and do whatever it is that we're doing with us without being drama and, monopolizing time at all, they're definitely a good friend. So again, so the first thing I would say, definitely, medication if you need it. Number 2, be in the light, live a life that's transparent. like talk about it. There's no shame. There's absolutely no shame. And in this world today, it's becoming more and more common, and it's becoming more and more socially acceptable. So just let it go. You're struggling with depression, be real about it. You're struggling with anxiety, be real about it. I think a lot more people talk about anxiety, and that's not so much the issue as far as being like, but to be honest with you, I have met people who didn't want to talk about anxiety, and someone had a full-blown anxiety attack, just straight up didn't show up one day. They were supposed to babysit for us or something like that, and they just didn't show up. And then I didn't find out until like 8 months later that they actually had like a full-blown panic attack, anxiety attack. And I'm like, if I would have known that, I would have been like, in on you. We wouldn't have thought you'd, gotten a car accident or something. But it's really powerful to be transparent with people, because then we can be a support to each other. And not an anchor or dead weight, and we can lift each other up. So transparency is important. The second thing I would say is connect with your higher power. For me, that's Jesus. For me, that's through prayer, words of affirmation, music, and nature. And if God's not your thing, and you don't really believe in Jesus, this still all makes sense, because you're still going to be in communion with who you believe your higher power is. Your words have power no matter who you believe in. And music and nature are great ways to just connect and to be distracted from what's going on up here, And so taking a walk in nature, listening to a symphony, listening to sounds and different things that will stimulate the mind. Those are all really fantastic ways to help alleviate that. And again, these are things that are really hard to do when you're in the pits of depression. But if you can, those are 4 things that I would say are very, very impactful as far as reaching out to your higher power for freedom. And so that's just the whole, Father God, help me, prayer, words, I am free from this in Jesus' name. And so worship music is really amazing. I was actually just doing my devotion the other day, and in Philippians 4-7, it talks about anxiety, and it talks about and I wrote it down on here, the key to overcoming depression and anxiety, and a lot of people quote this scripture, Philippians 4:6, be anxious for nothing, but with everything in prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, make your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your heart and mind. So a lot of us know that we're not supposed to be anxious for anything, but that we're supposed to pray. We're supposed to thank God in advance for it. But the thing that a lot of people skip is verse 4. Verse 4, right before that, actually says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. And so anytime the Bible duplicates something or repeats itself, it's kind of like a screaming, like, dude, this is what you need to do. That's kind of how God's trying to communicate. And so it's just really powerful that even scripture, when it's talking about anxiety, wants you to rejoice. That's the first step. And so, and it's within that rejoicing that we can actually then be anxious for nothing. And so anyway, that's why music and worship music, again, it's all connected to your higher power, are all really powerful ways to overcome depression and anxiety. So we've talked about medication. We've talked about living transparently. We've talked about our higher power. So now I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about some natural things that we can do to help lift us out of anxiety and depression. I feel like the first one that's kind of a little bit more obvious is exercise. So to be honest, not always the best at doing the exercise thing. However, I do have 3 tiny humans that keep me extremely active most days. And so I can definitely say that has actually helped me more than anything else. I can't tell you how many days I remember being really, really, really on the struggle bus with depression, and how much I remember saying, man, if I didn't have these kids, this would be really bad. Really, really bad, because my kids forced me to get out of bed. My kids forced me to have to feed them. My kids forced me to have to do stuff with them. And so that's definitely helpful. So exercise releases endorphins. Anytime you do that, little endorphins, I remember our pastor used to say little dolphins, dolphins. They just and they would just get you all excited and hopped up. So endorphins are phenomenal ways to help you with that. But again, depression can be very crippling. So it's kind of hard to get you to that place of like actually leaving the house. And so sometimes having the thing of like, well, I'm just going to go for a walk in nature, that sometimes helps get that, ball rolling in the direction of exercise. So exercise is highly, highly key. And the more and more you release those endorphins, the less and less depression can have that power, because it will help change your levels and everything like that as well. So finally, the last two things that I want to talk about, which I think is a big thing that people have been reaching out to me for, which is how am I doing it naturally? So like I mentioned, essential oils. So my fifth thing that I'm going to talk about is essential oils. And so there are a lot of essential oils out there that are great at supporting different systems of the body. There are plenty of apps and resources where you can just plug in the words of the medical conditions that you're struggling with, and there will be suggested resources. Having a higher power is very helpful whenever you're addressing essential oils, because you can pray and ask God what he would have you do. Another thing that you can do that is just very simple and basic is muscle test yourself for essential oils. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, and I'm going to hopefully be able to stand up and show you guys. But basically, you stand up in a room, and while you're standing, you grab a bottle of an essential oil, okay? And you're basically allowing your body to have a voice. And so for me, how to explain this best? You can do muscle testing with a friend where they pull your fingers apart. It's the first time I ever experienced it. That one I honestly kind of thought that's a little woo-woo, because I thought maybe the person was kind of pulling harder, not pulling as hard, because they wanted me to buy a product. And so I actually didn't quite believe that one as much until I learned this type of muscle testing, because you can do it to yourself and see what your body wants, and you can decide whether or not you want to make your body go forward or backwards, or you can believe that your body actually is trying to tell you something. And so we have all these things happening inside of our body. Our body has a voice. It wants something. And so a way you can muscle test yourself, I'm going to stand sideways so you guys can see if I go forward or backwards. Okay. You place an oil on your chest, and based off of which direction you go in is the direction that you need, whether or not you need the oil. So right now, I feel like I'm going backwards, and I am going a little bit backwards. Okay. It's going to be really easy for you guys to see this. And so I can grab another essential oil and place it on my chest and kind of see which way I'm going. All right, so I went forward. And so the first oil that I had was highest potential, which I actually was diffusing for most of the day today. And the oil that I just grabbed off the shelf was humility. And so that one is an oil that my body is actually wanting right now. So as you look through a list of essential oils, or you use the oils that you have at home, you can muscle test yourself and see which one would be the ideal one for what you need. It may not always be the essential oil that's going to hit home, but they are hitting your limbic system within 4 seconds. If you apply them to your body, they're going to be in your bloodstream within 26 seconds. So I just dabbed a couple drops here on my arm like that, and then I'm just rubbing my forearms together. That smells really good. That's nice. And so again, 4 seconds, it's in your limbic system of your brain. And your limbic system is where your fight or flight is actually housed. And so having the oils triggering that part of your brain is definitely very, very helpful whenever you're going through anxiety or depression. So, again, we're not talking about curing anything. We're not talking about healing anything. We're just talking about supporting your body and supporting you emotionally. And you have to find what works for you. Everybody's different, and every day is different. I mean, I've had days that Suga was everything, and I've had days that Suga didn't really make a difference. And so you just really have to have a good arsenal of high quality essential oils available if that's the path that you're choosing to take. And so I will say this, though, the brand does matter. There are a lot of companies out there who are jumping on the essential oil make money game, and they are not taking the time to vet their farms. They're not taking the time to check their soil. They're not taking their time to do all that. And the FDA is not really very helpful. I love you, FDA, but so sorry. But the FDA's rules on essential oil is only 5% of the bottle actually has to be lavender. The other 95% can be whatever the company wants to stick in there. And how they produce that lavender is not actually regulated. So they can use hexane, for example, which is a chemical extender. They could put hexane into the lavender buds, and that can, when it's distilled, will actually cause the lavender to release more essential oil. And so now the company just doubled their batch of essential oil by using a chemical to extract the essential oil. And then you're going to stick it in your diffuser, or you're going to stick it on your arm and start breathing that in. And then you're wondering why you still have a headache. So that's often a lot of times what happens when it comes to essential oils, and why there's so many companies out there that are saying, oh, mine's pure, mine's therapeutic grade. And that's because the FDA says, sure, call it that. As long as only 5% of the bottle actually has lavender in it, you can call it pure and therapeutic grade. We're fine with that. And meanwhile, we're the consumer and we know none of this. And we're just like, oh, but girl, it says it's pure. This one says it's therapeutic grade. I can use this one. No, boo, you can't. Mm-mm. I mean, you can, but I wouldn't, because it's kind of the opposite of what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to go natural health and natural wellness, then you want to try to find a company that's actually going to, have quality product. Hard to do. The easiest thing to do is I chose a company that lets me go out to the farm, that lets me be a part of the process. They answer the phones. And so I chose Young Living because, they're the oldest essential oil company too. So it's like over 25 years. There's nobody else that's older than this company. So it's kind of like the original. And so I feel like that's a lot more safer too. But the biggest reason why is because I've actually been to the farm and I've actually made my own bottle of essential oil with this company. And I'm like, that's a real company. But anyway, so let's talk about the other thing that's really powerful when it comes to overcoming, at least for me, overcoming depression and anxiety and the things that I've done. And I'll say that this is probably, if I had to choose my top four, it was three, now it's four. So my top four nutritionals that have made the most impact on my life and that are non-negotiables in my house and that are always here, and I take them on a regular basis. Number one would be Ningxia Red. So Ningxia Red is a red drink. It's made from wolfberries. It's very high in antioxidants. It also has a lot of citrus oils inside of it. And so what it's going to do is it's going to actually help scrub the cells of my body. It's going to help eliminate free radicals. And it's going to help boost my health and wellness, because I'm sorry, I don't eat 40 radishes and, 7 carrots and I don't know how many vegetables I'm supposed to eat every single day, but I know I don't do that. And so because I don't always do that and hit that mark, I really love having Ningxia Red because it's, an option. So another thing that I do is Super B. I used to take B12 because I thought B12 is all I needed. Excuse me, and I've heard all these people say that B12 was really great for energy and it was a very great supplement, and most people don't have B12. Most people are B12 deficient, and I'm just like, oh, okay. So I was taking B12, didn't really notice a big difference. And so I was just like, okay. So then I started taking Super B. When I switched over to Super B, which is the product that Young Living has, the reason why I switched is because I read the bottle and I'm like, oh my God, this has like 7 or 8 different types of vitamin B. I didn't know there was more than just B12. So yes, I'm learning, right? We're all learning. Maybe some of you are watching this and you're like, oh, I didn't know there was more than one B12 and that there was more vitamin B than just B12. There's more. There's a whole lot more. And so I started taking Super B, and it was just night and day difference. It was just, there was no anything. I stopped getting, between Ningxia Red and B12, I stopped getting that slump at like 1 o'clock where I was like, if these children don't take a nap, I'm just going to pass out, because I was so tired. And so I will say Ningxia Red and B12 were definitely the ones that major game changers there. And then the other 2 nutritionals that were really big for me was vitamin D. And actually vitamin D, I learned about that way before I even learned about essential oils or anything. And make sure it's vitamin D3. And you need a lot of IUDs of that. Okay. So it's measured in IUDs. Okay. And I think it's like 10,000 IUDs you can have in a day. And a lot of it has to do with sunshine. So now in the summertime, if you are I'm in Virginia, okay, so in the summertime, I don't have to take near as much vitamin D because the sun gives me the correct amount of vitamin D. It activates the right amount within my body, okay? But in the wintertime, y'all need to up that vitamin D3 because the sun does not give you the proper exposure in the winter months. And there's actually an azimuth table that you can go to on NASA's website, and you can actually see the position of the sun and when the rays are going to have the most, the best for vitamin D production in your body. So it's pretty amazing. I was so blown away by that. My friends, the Pancas in in Charlottesville actually taught me all about vitamin D. And so that's really been a huge thing. And that's where you hear a lot of people talk about seasonal depression, where in the wintertime they have a lot more struggles, or whenever it's raining, right? Like, what is the state that has the highest, what's it called? Highest suicidal rate is actually in like, I think Washington State, where it rains a lot, So again, sunshine is a very, very big deal. Vitamin D is a very big part of that. And so taking a supplement that has a high amount of vitamin D, at least 10,000 IUDs a day, is really helpful. And again, talk to your doctor and, medical professional with all of this stuff. But all of this stuff is, I've talked to a lot of medical professionals and they're like, this is all good stuff. So the biggest thing for me that I had learned was within my diet was also gluten. I found that gluten actually triggered depression for me more than anything else. And I discovered that about 3 years ago when my son's best friend at the time, who actually has celiac, had said to me when I had done a 21-day fix, she said to me, I forgot how it came up, but she was like, hey, you're getting depression? I said, yeah. And she's like, you should see if you take gluten out of your diet, if that'll change anything. And I said, well, I just finished a 21-day fix and I didn't eat any gluten for 3 weeks. I was like, and I just had pizza with my girlfriend and it was horrible. I had manic depression. It was so bad. It was really bad. And she's like, you should try and see if, try gluten-free again and see if it changes anything. And sure enough, when I got gluten out of my diet, I had energy. I was friendly. I did not struggle with depression near as bad as I did when I had gluten in my diet. So whenever I would eat gluten, I would just spiral. And the very next day, I was super depressed. And it took me 2 days to get out of that depression. And so what you eat is a very big game changer. For me also, I have a herniated disc between my L4 and L5. And so if I eat too much dairy, it will actually cause a higher amount of inflammation in our body. And so all of us have inflammation at times, but dairy can actually make inflammation worse. And so whenever I take dairy out of my diet, I actually am in less pain. And guess what, guys? When you're not in pain, you're a lot nicer of a person. The more pain you're in, it's a whole lot harder to put on a happy face. And so that's definitely significant when you struggle with depression and anxiety, is to get your pain levels down. And if you are struggling with pain, then you definitely want to consider eliminating dairy from your diet, because dairy, again, can cause inflammation. More inflammation means greater amounts of pain. So when I don't eat dairy, my pain numbers go from probably like a 6 to a 4. And that's just simply with taking dairy out of my diet. And so every once in a while I'll try it and I'll go out to dinner and they'll have this beautiful brie on a plate and I want to try it. I take a bite and then I regret it the next day because I'm hurting really bad and it took my pain from a 4 to a 6. And when you have a lot to do, like taking care of tiny humans or living your life, pain is not helpful. And then when you add depression and anxiety to the mix, pain really sucks. So dairy just became one of those non-negotiables. It's not worth it for me. And so anyhow, recently about 6 weeks ago, I tried, this is my 4th nutritional, because remember I was telling you about 4 different nutritionals that I have been working on for my health and well-being. I tried something called Cortistop. So cortisol is something that is released in our body whenever we experience stress. And so I actually gave this product a try. It's called Cortistop, and it helps eradicate, it helps lower the cortisol levels within your body. And so I gave that a go, and I had probably the best 2 weeks of my life. Like absolute best. Just the energy was doing great, had no issues. And so I actually went on a trip with my husband to Mexico. And while I was there, I took my Cortistop with me. And I felt like my higher power, I felt like I was praying to God. When I took the Cortistop, I felt like God said, don't go ahead and eat gluten. And that's like a big test for me, is that if I can eat gluten and not have any issues with depression, that's kind of a big deal. And so sure enough, I took Cortistop and I had no issue with depression whatsoever. And it was pretty amazing. And so for the last 2 weeks, 2 weeks after that, I ate a lot of gluten and took a lot of Cortistop. And the only thing that I will notice, that I will say, I didn't have any depression, but I definitely was lethargic. So the gluten does make me more tired, but it doesn't make me depressed when I take the Cortistop. So I haven't tried gluten with no Cortistop yet, and Cortistop is an 8-week is a product that you should take for 8 weeks whenever you do it, so that it's a full trial through your system. But anyhow, so those are my nutritionals that I would say were a big deal. And those are also nutrition tips. So it's not just about supplements and vitamins and stuff, but it's also just about thinking about what you're eating and what you're putting into your body, both on the advantageous side and the disadvantageous side, because there are things that you're putting in your body that can actually cause an issue. So anyway, that is pretty much all of the things I wanted to go over. So you've got my 6 key steps on how I have managed to live well with depression and anxiety. And I really hope that this helps you out. Come here, Squish. This is one of my little loves who definitely keeps me on my toes. And she's a very, very big part of the joy in my life. And she has definitely challenged me and inspired me to want to live well with depression and anxiety, and not let those be things that stop me or hinder me. So I really hope this is empowering to you. I hope that you have a greater understanding of what it means to struggle with depression and anxiety. And we hope you have an absolutely wonderful day or evening. Right, Squishy? Yeah. Can you wave bye to everyone? Bye. Thanks so much for watching.